Hello there, welcome to Craft with Fee. Well, today's video is one that has been asked for constantly, and I have covered the points that I'm going to make today in separate videos, but I've not really done one in just a single standalone video that I can refer to. So that's what we're going to do today, and the topic is English paper piecing. So a lot of people would be quite familiar with what English paper piecing is, but it's when you wrap some fabric around a template and you can either sew it down or glue it down to form the shape, and then you remove the papers if that's the type of papers that you're using, and then you're left with the shape that you can then sew. It's perfect for scraps. You'll see lots of different projects by lots of different designers around that have used English paper piecing. This cushion here that I've made, which is one that I released in the past couple of weeks, is an example of what you can do with scrappy hexagons. I'll just get rid of that. And I'll also show you one of the woodland projects that we did recently, and we used pentagons, and you can see that we formed a circle there. I've got a needle sitting in there ready to show you. So the uses for shapes for English paper piecing is numerous. You can make them, it's a sort of fussy cut with your fabrics, make them really, really pretty. You can do them scrappy. You can do whatever you want. You can see here that I've made a sweet little pin cushion with some tiny little 1/2-inch hexagons there, and I've just popped it onto a little circle of fabric, and it's just so cute. And the little pieces of fabric that I've used would ordinarily be thrown away because they're not of much use for anything else, but that I think makes a beautiful little pin cushion. Now, there are a few different types of papers that you can use. I have a friend here in Tasmania, Australia, Helen Stubbings, who has produced her own papers that she uses for English paper piecing. Now, these are a paper that you can iron on, so they are quite thin. They are water soluble to a certain extent, so you would put them onto your fabric with the iron. You would then cut a seam allowance around, and then you can glue down the sides of the fabric onto your shape, and then you can leave the papers in, because when they have their first wash, they'll become quite pliable, and they're perfect. And I like to use these when I'm using small shapes. And when you see this one here, this was actually made with Helen's papers, because it is a lot more difficult to remove papers when you're using smaller shapes. Obviously, it can be done, and it is done all the time, but leaving the papers in is also an option. And I wanted to include that in my little tutorial for you today so that you know that that's an option. But the usual way for most people is to make a cardboard template. And you'll see here I have a square, I have an elongated hexagon, and I have a normal hexagon, which is a 1-inch. And these are printed onto about a 120 GSM upwards card. You can see it's not overly thick, it's quite bendable. And then that is used to put inside the fabric to make your shape. Now, I've been asked many times about downloads for these shapes, and I have produced some downloads. So you can see here we have an elongated hexagon download. All of the downloads have a 1-inch square on them, and also in the store there are printing instructions so that you can work out how to fix your printer settings so that you get them to the right measurement. So we have 1-inch elongated hexagons, we have 3/4-inch hexagons, we have 1-inch pentagons, and we have 1-inch hexagons, 1/2-inch hexagons, and 1-inch squares. Now, all of these can be downloaded. It's a very small fee of $2 Australian per shape, and you just instantly download them from our website, feefeeandme.com. There are lots of other resources on the internet that you might be able to find, but as I said, I've been asked about these and decided that yes, I would put them in the store so you can download them easily and you can cut your own shapes. So we're going to start off this little tutorial today just by showing you how you do go about cutting those shapes. Okay, so I have a rotary cutter here which I use for paper. I have a different coloured little ribbon on the end, so I know that that's my paper cutting rotary cutter. And when I'm cutting papers, I just like to line up my line across the page if I'm doing hexagons in particular, and then you can just cut a straight line straight through there like that. Okay, and so then I would cut down on the next row, and so on. You would keep going. And let me just get that out of the way for a moment, and we'll get rid of these. And so then what you can do is you can grab your scissors and you can finish off cutting the hexagon simply by just doing this. Now this is quite therapeutic. You can sit in front of the telly and do this and have a whole session of cutting your papers. But of course you can also buy them already pre-cut by machine. That's entirely up to you, but I'm giving you this option because this is something that has been asked for by customers. So let's show you how you get that fabric onto your little piece of paper there. So we're just going to use a scrappy bit of chambray. This is Tilda chambray, just for the purpose of the video. And I'm probably going to need some fabric that's a bit bigger. Let me just grab another scrap. Okay, we'll use this one. This is more like it. Okay, now what you can do at this point is that you can get a pen or a pencil or whatever you want to do, and you can draw around your template on the back side of your fabric. Now, if you want a fussy cut, I do have a video on fussy cutting. You can go and have a look at that. You can, of course, buy commercial templates. Lots of different stores have them. So you can buy a template like this, and that's the 1-inch hexagon is what you get in the middle, and then of course it's got the seam allowance around the outside. That's up to you. You can even make them with a bit of a template plastic if you want to. We're not going to bother. Okay, so we have our hexagon drawn onto the back of the fabric, and what we're going to do now is we're just going to cut a 1/4 inch seam allowance or thereabouts. We're just going to eyeball it. We don't need to be super precise for this. It can be just whatever you think, as long as you've got a bit of seam allowance to turn over. Now I have done this with pieces that are smaller than I need. If you're very careful taking the papers out, you can do that. Depends on what size scrap I want to use, to be honest. As I said, sometimes I'm very frugal and I manage to get it out of a piece that's not quite big enough, but I really don't want to waste the fabric. But as I said, it's very therapeutic. I know that a lot of people in the group have been doing English paper piecing, and as I said, I've had quite a few messages about some beginner sessions. So here we go. We're doing our first video session on how to English paper piece. Now, there are 2 ways to baste the card onto your fabric. You can stitch them down, so you would fold over your fabric and you would fold over this side here, and then you pop a little stitch in here. And then you come along and then you put another little stitch in here, and then you can easily remove the stitches when it comes time to, when you've sewn all your pieces together. But I find the very easiest way to do it is to use a water-soluble glue pen. You can buy little refills like these ones, which go in them. You can also use an Elmer's stationary glue, which is also water-soluble. It's like a Yoo-hoo glue stick type thing, but it is not as easy to use as these pens because it's obviously got a much larger nib on the end. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to see what I did there. You're just going to pop your glue onto your paper, and then you're going to fold your fabric over. Now you do need to pop your glue a little bit away from that edge and not put too much on. And then you're going to fold over your fabric. Now when you're doing a hexagon, you always try to do the opposite side so that you get that lovely tension on the front there. You'll see that it's nice and smooth. And it's super easy to do when you're doing opposite sides. Okay, so that's what starts off your hexagon, and then you just keep going around the hexagon, and then you fold your fabric down as you go, and you get that lovely shape. So you get those nice crisp edges, and you can see there that we now have a beautiful little hexagon. So we are going to use another paper, and I'm just going to do another one here so that I can show you how to sew them together. Now when we sew them together, we're going to be using a whip stitch, and I like to use a thread that is called bottom line. Now it is a polyester thread, and it's available in lots of different colours. I either use white or grey depending on what fabric I'm using. It's nice and strong. I use 2 strands of it, and I use a nice thin needle. Okay. So let's put the lid on that. Okay. So we've now got our hexagons. This works for whatever shape that you're doing, and the seam on which you want to join them, so you can decide whereabouts you're going to join them, and the sides obviously are the same. You put them together with their right sides together. Okay. Now at this point, I like to use a little clip just to hold them. It's like having additional fingers. You don't have to worry about it moving if you've got the clips on there, and you can see that the corners are lined up beautifully. Okay, now let me grab my needle. Okay, so we've got our needle and thread, and as mentioned, we have 2 strands of the thread. I have a little knot in the end there, and we are going to get our needle and pop it up through underneath the seam, and we're going to come out right at that first corner here where we're going to start our stitching. And what that does is it hides the knot in underneath the seam. And then all we're going to do is we're just going to take a little bit of fabric from one side to the other, like that. Hopefully you can see that. And then we're just going to whip. So we're going to whip all the way along this seam. And this can be so therapeutic. You can just sit and stitch these together until you go blue in the face. It's fantastic. Now, one of the little tricks that I like to do is when I get to about halfway point or just before, I like to put in a little locking knot. Now, the reason I do that is because if this comes unraveled at any point, it'll only become unraveled as far as the knot. Okay? So to do the knot, you just need to pop your needle through, and your thread will be on the left-hand side of your needle. So hopefully you can see that there. So we're going to take our thread and we're going to cross it over onto the right side of the needle, and then we're going to go under, and then it'll be back to where it started from. Then we're going to take the thread from the back of the needle, and we're going to do the exact same thing but in the opposite way. So we're going to go to the left of the needle and then back under, and then back where we started from. Now what this does is it causes a figure 8, and hopefully you can see this figure 8 here that is starting to lock itself, and there we have a locking stitch. And so that means, as I said, that it won't go any further than the locking stitch. Now you can do a locking stitch at the start of your sewing if you want, and then you can do one in the middle, and then you can do one at the end. But if you're using a nice strong thread and you are stitching nice little stitches, you're really not going to have too much trouble with it coming unraveled, to be quite honest. It's going to be fine. Okay, so now I'm to that corner, to my first corner, and then we're going to just do that locking stitch here on the end, just to make sure that it can't come unraveled. And then we're just going to trim off our cotton, and I like to give it a tiny little bit of a tail there, just so I'm not cutting it too close. And then we can remove our clips, and we can open out our hexagon, and it is now joined. And you can see that sorry, I've taken it away from the camera. You can see there that you really can't see any of my stitches. It's very neat, and it's a nice strong seam. So that is how you English paper piece. Now, of course, depending on what you're making as to what direction you're going in, if you're going to make yourself a hexagon flower, you can continue putting hexagons all the way around your centre hexagon, like so, and then you will have a flower. You can do things in rows. Look, if you have a look on the internet or on Pinterest and go and have a look at English paper piecing, you will be amazed at what you can do with a bit of paper and a bit of fabric. It's just beautiful. Okay, so what I wanted to show you today also was how to remove those papers if you're using the cardboard papers. Now you'll see here that I've made a block of 1-inch honeycombs, which fit in beautifully with 1-inch squares. You can see there that they look amazing. I'm using Tilda Woodland fabrics here, and I'm going to be sewing this onto a background fabric. But before I do that, I need to remove all of these papers that you can see here. Okay, now to do that, you can just simply get the fabrics and peel them away. What I like to do before I do that is give it a nice hot press with a nice steamy iron, because the steam from the iron helps to just weaken that glue because it's water soluble. The steam will start to dissipate the glue and you won't have such a strong hold. And the fact that you've not used too much glue at the start is also a great tip, as I mentioned before. So you can just use your fingernail and you can just simply pull up the sides of the fabric away from the cardboard, and then the cardboard will just simply pop straight out. And you'll see there that you are then left with your shape that's been sewn together. Now, the other thing that you can do is you can buy one of these scrapbooking tools. I call it a pokey tool because it's got a pokey sharp end there. We're not going to use that end. We're going to use the spatula end. And it helps if you don't have fingernails. But it also is good even if you do have fingernails, because your fingers do get sore if you're removing a very large section of one of these. Now, I got this from the Kaiser Craft store, but you can, oh, there we go, Huxley wants to come and help. But you can find them anywhere online, and I just simply pull my papers out like that. So that's how simple it is. And as I said, once you learn how to English paper piece, I will be very surprised if you don't become addicted very soon. It is so soothing and therapeutic and a great use of scraps. I've got a few videos using English paper piecing. This one included is way back about a year ago. It's just 2 little hexagons sewn together to make a little key fob. So you can use them for so many different things. It's great. Anyway, there you go. That's my very, very quick little class on English paper piecing. I hope that you've enjoyed it. And I do hope that you give it a go. Don't forget you can download the sheets if you want to cut your own papers, and our website is fifiandme.com. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.